A couple months ago, I made a video talking about why there's so many examples of high-level Smash players performing well in traditional fighting games, and you don't really see like high-level traditional fighting game players really trying Smash. This was a pretty new type of video for me, and I thought I could uniquely talk about this since I started by playing Smash and then transitioned to playing traditional fighters, and I didn't know how the video was going to do, to be honest. The video getting a lot of views made me really happy, but also the comments. There were a ton of comments. Now, if you didn't watch that video, one, you should, but two, I really touched on stuff that's outside the game. I didn't really talk about like these players of these games are better than this, because it was a lot of like talking about motivation and established games versus new games. Established games being specifically a version of a game that is out for a long time. Wink wink Melee, wink wink, more than 20 years old, older than some of the people who watch this channel. And the discussion in the comments was great. I got a lot of interesting insight from people who also had opinions on what type of things outside the game would make this thing happen. However, there was definitely a group of people that were just there to glaze Melee.
Yes, sir.
After reading the comments over the past couple months, because people keep watching it and people keep commenting on it, I decided to find examples specifically from people who it read like they didn't watch the video, misconceptions that they had about traditional fighting games. And then later, I want to do the opposite. Again, I think it's something that I can do pretty uniquely because I have competed in both. But the good news is for this, I can use comments. So let's get started. So something that affects combos is that every character has their own fall speed and weight, which are two entirely different things. As far as I'm aware, Smash is the only fighting game with its own weight system and add directional influence, and you've got yourself an extremely complex game that you must memorize to succeed. Other games, combos are universal among different characters. Other games, easy to memorize, Smash is harder. Point blank. I think they want to end it with point blank, period. So I wanted to start with this comment because of the emphasis on combos, which I find pretty interesting. Because Melee does have a pretty interesting and unique combo game just for fighting games in general, right? You have to think about weight, fall speed, aka gravity, and then DI. All three of these things are really important in addition to what your character can actually do. There are like set combos, but the opponent can always interact because of DI. The thing is though, the first thing they start with is with weight and fall speed, aka gravity. Does the audience want to take just a small guess at what fighting game has weight and varied fall speeds? Any guesses? Anybody? You can even pause. You can pause and think about it if you want. If you said the Guilty Gear series, the game I've been posting about on this channel for the past like two years or so, then you are correct. Yes. Even though Strive did remove the weight aspect, weight and fall speed, aka gravity, have been a huge part of Guilty Gear since XX. So again, I started my Guilty Gear tenure in Xrd. So in that game, you had to worry about weight and gravity. You had super heavies, heavies, normals, lights. Usually the girls had a unique hurt box. Over time in Guilty Gear, they've made it easier to combo in general. In XX, especially earlier versions, we actually did a watch party. Kizzy K and I did a watch party of Slash, and some characters looked like they were just not allowed to do combos at all. Then other characters are just, for some reason, allowed to just bombo you, just huge combos for no reason. Over time, they kind of changed this and made this easier. XX also has this aspect of giving characters weird hurt boxes as unique defense. This was pretty common for characters like Venom and Johnny, and a little bit of this transferred over into Xrd, but I think people who play Xrd and XX would agree that it's probably harder and a little weirder to combo in XX, also older game by the way, than Xrd. And then Strive took it a step further, first by taking out air teching in general, which changed the combo system quite a bit, and then later removing gravity, which actually overall was a good change, I think, because the gravity system benefited heavy characters more than light characters. DI though is far more uncommon in fighting games. As far as I'm aware, using the commentator's word, as far as I'm aware, the only game that I know of that's a traditional fighter is a 3D fighter. It's Soul Calibur, has DI. And I'm not sure that Soul Calibur, because I'm not really an expert on 3D fighters, I'm not sure that Soul Calibur has like the mix-up aspect of DI that Melee has. So once you make some progress in Melee, you can mix people up in your combos by taking advantage of DI. It's kind of a weird idea if you play fighting games, but if you're like a decent Smash player, you know of this and you use this quite a bit. So this would be the thing I would point at more that's like unusual for a fighting game player, being like, oh, I have to like sometimes mix people up during my combo. There's plenty to memorize, especially if there's like a weight and gravity system or like different hurt boxes. There's plenty to memorize. Combo conversion ability kind of depends on the game. The main thing you would also have to think about is that new fighting games come out all the time. So over time, they just keep trying to come up with ways to make combos easier, shorter. So you have that aspect too. Just like the angle they approached it, like, oh, Melee is the only game with weight and gravity. I was like, bruh, this is not where you want to start, you know what I'm saying? Number 2, my one-liner internet take, specifically Melee. So they are ready to say this is a take, so respect for that. Melee is fucking hard. If you can play Melee, you will not find a fighting game that is harder to learn. You've already developed the skills to learn anything else. If you're going from GG or SF to Melee specifically, you're in for some shit, some crazy shit. The movement in that game is so hard, so absurd, and the barrier to entry as a result is I had to double check to make sure it said K2. So there's a top NRS player who also did really well in Strive, my homie K7. We already got K6, so now we got, anyway. The barrier to entry as a result is a K2 sized mountain. So we're talking about something pretty interesting this time, because this time we're talking about skill floors overall, right? So if you know me, I have a take. Basically, I think if you are a good player of a genre, you can just be good in any game of that genre. You'll have different like things you're good at and different things you'll have to work on, but basically you will do what you have to do. That's probably one of the main lessons I've learned from competing in many fighting games over time. If we're going to include platform fighters too, so you have Melee, Brawl, then move to Melty Blood multiple versions, BlazBlue multiple versions, Persona multiple versions, Exord multiple versions, Dragon Ball multiple versions, Grand Blue Fantasy versus the original, not Rising, and then Strive. Now, not counting other games like Vampire Savior, SF4, SF5, games where I had like small stints in Injustice 1, Injustice 2, stuff like that. So, after playing all of these, for sure, Melee has a high skill floor, mostly in that you can't really play the real game unless you have a bare minimum of tech skill, and it really depends on your character. If you're gonna play like a Marth or a Falcon or Peach, you're not gonna have to deal with that much to actually start playing the game. But if you're trying to play like Fox and Falco and be cool, I'm sorry, bias, my bad, bias. The hate came out. I said Falco, the hate came out. Anyway, if you're gonna play Fox or Falco, you will definitely take longer to get to the skill floor and play the actual game. Why is that though? If Melee came out today, if it was a brand new game today, the way it was brand new for everybody in December of whatever, 2001, you would think it was a pretty fucking easy game, not gonna lie. The main thing is that Melee is an established game. So I talk about this in the other video. If you don't know what I mean by an established game, or you can use this to refer to characters in like metas and stuff too, but an established game is just a game that's been around for a while. It has established meta, it has established top players of every character, who performs the best, blah 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 blah. It's extra noticeable in games that don't get patched, so older games. So Melee, of course, again, is from 2001, so that is an extremely established game. So not only do you have to worry about the skill floor, but also the game that has existed before you start playing the game. I actually make this a point in the other video because let's pretend I am Daigo Umehara, right? Street Fighter 6 just came out. I have been playing Street Fighter my whole life. And then we'll pretend that Smash 6 comes out the same day as Street Fighter 6. That would be kind of cool. What game am I going to play? Am I going to throw away all my experience playing Street Fighter to try to go to Smash, where if we're talking about Smash 6, you're talking about Brawl and on, because, you know, a lot of Brawl people were also good in 4, were also good in Ultimate. Am I going to go to that game that has a long time established player base with established top players who are good at whatever and try to catch up in that game? Or am I going to just keep on playing Street Fighter where Capcom supports it and there's Capcom Pro Tour and I get to collab with VTubers, I get to play Ken again, and I get to walk up a DPU again? And this is something that you, once you're in a game for a while, so if you're just starting in a genre, you're basically just playing like what's fun and what's cool, right? For someone who's been in a genre for a long time, like myself, obviously I want to play the games I like and I want to play characters that I like, but you also have to think about this thing, like, should I stay with this game because this new game came out? Because there's new fighting games coming out all the time. So what this comment is doing is actually a pretty common mistake in traditional fighters, because there's so many fighting games, of you're comparing something that has been around for a very long time with something that's brand new. which honestly is not going to hold up. I think for someone who's into Melee, you'd be pretty surprised how hard picking up a fighting game from 2009-ish and before is. Because starting from 09, again, we get new games all the time. New fighting games come out all the time. Like I mentioned before, fighting game devs are constantly trying to make fighting games more accessible and make it easier for new people to get into new entries. Melee is like the definition of a hardcore gamer's game, so it's pretty hard to compare the two like that. I think it's easier, and you would probably be surprised at how difficult it would be to pick up an old established fighting game like something like Third Strike or Marvel 3. Side note, I know Marvel 3 came out after 2009, but I think it's a pretty good example for obvious execution because of movement stuff, which is very comparable with Melee, where Third Strike, you might not think it's a high execution game because it's not like fast in a traditional way like Melee is, but it is much more difficult than you think it is. And all the knowledge about the game on top of that. Alright, so last one. Fighting game skills don't transfer super well to Smash. They do transfer a little bit, but not a lot. Smash skills transfer very well with fighting games for the most part. So probably the simplest out of the three. You hear this quite a bit because platform fighter versus traditional fighter, right? But the two have a lot of crossover, even in stuff where you feel like it would not have a lot of crossover. So one, the obvious would be the concept of neutral in general. Footsies. Of course, Smash is all about footsies, literally. Funny enough, coming from me, and this is a whole other discussion about how right now, as of this recording, there have been some debates about neutrals and neutral skipping and new system mechanics in new fighting games. Neutral is just a huge part of these games in general. Execution too. So execution or tech skill, if you're playing Melee, Smash, whatever, you need the execution to be able to do what you want to do. Some games have higher skill floors. We talked about this earlier. Some games you can hop in really easily. It just depends on what the devs want you to do. Over time in traditional fighting games, they make things easier. I want to say the same about Ultimate. If there's somebody in the Ultimate comments who wants to either like talk to me about it, or if there's some type of expert on this, I would love to learn some stuff. Definitely let me know. There's a concept of mix-ups, so both series of games have mix-ups. It's just different, you know? And I think for Smash in particular, one thing I'll definitely give fighting game players is that they are way better at explaining mix-ups and like how like a mix-up situation. Maybe today's Melee players are much better at explaining mix-ups, but at least when I was starting, people would be like, oh, LordKnight, you gotta use mind games. Oh, you got to mind game them. And I just used to do like honestly just stupid shit because I was like, oh, I have to mind game them. Where like once I started playing fighting games, I was like, oh, like I'm Byakuya, I jump at you, I do JA low or JA overhead. Got it. Like that's so much more easy to understand. And Melee does have these ideas. The aforementioned DI mix-ups, for example. A simple one would be, I'm Marth, I'm fighting Fox, I grab Fox by the edge. I could forward throw, forward smash him, but he could DI away from it. Okay, if I do up throw instead of forward throw, he's going to DI out into the void, I jump and do down air. And then he goes, this sucks, I need to DI in, and then instead I do grab immediate forward throw, he DIs in because he's worried about up throw, and I F smash him. Very simple example, of course, but that's the same idea. So instead of going high-low, it's which way I'm going to throw you. Am I going to throw you out or am I going to throw you up? For a little bit more on that, if you're a traditional fighting game player, you don't play Smash, when you hit people upwards, the person who's getting hit can go away or towards you, and then when you hit people outwards, you can hold up or down. There's more nuance in that, but that's like the absolute basic idea of DI. Another example, screen control. So for Smash, they'll talk about stage control. For fighting games, depending on the game, you'll talk about either screen control. Team games usually talk about screen control, using beams to cover this, hiding behind this thing, stuff like that. Enemy games, sometimes you'll hear about screen control, but not so much. Depending on the game, you hear about, oh, you got to keep them in the box, aka screen position, don't let your opponent out the corner. These skills are quite easily transferable between games. There'll be like small tweaks. So like, for example, in Smash, the stage control is really important, and the actual stage matters. In games I've played, the stages don't matter so much. I'm saying it slowly because I'm also trying to think of the games that I've been playing. But yeah, like it doesn't matter so much what stage you play on outside of like lag gets added or something like that. Where in Smash, like matchups, a big part of matchup is what stage you're on, but all these things, all these ideas are very easy to transfer. So I think people overcomplicate it a little bit, especially when they're like, oh, if you play Smash, you can learn a fighting game real quick, but if you play a fighting game, you can't go the other way, because even though these ideas exist, they're expressed in different ways. I mentioned Marvel before because, at least movement-wise, you'll definitely see parallels, and there's examples of Smash players playing Marvel, right? Homie Alucard, for example, shouts to Alucard. Especially since we're talking about Melee this whole video. A Melee player will look at Street Fighter, and you'd be like, that's easy. But usually when people go from fast game to slow game, all of a sudden, they don't realize that they lose the greatest element of speed, which you could pull up on people. In Street Fighter, not talking about Street Fighter 6, not talking about Drive Rush, but in Street Fighter, you have limited options, which means the opponent can check a lot of your stuff. So it's actually really hard to work around this. I didn't play a lot of Street Fighter 4 and 5, but I played a ton of Grand Blue when that game came out. Contrary to popular belief, because someone was like, you don't even play this game. I definitely grinded Grand Blue like crazy. And one of the big challenges of the game was, how do I work around playing in a slow game? I'm used to playing slow in a fast game, but I'm not used to just like playing around with like super limited options and stuff. It is quite a skill, and it's the reason why these same players have been doing well in Street Fighter all the time, even when the game is random and baby. So while these ideas exist, there's different degrees of understanding depending on where you're from. So if you play a slow game, like Street Fighter, it would be weird to go to Melee, even though like some ideas like dash dancing would be pretty simple, right? When you go from a fast game to a slow game, you're going to be like, oh man, I can't move, I can't get in, I can't get around Gao, what do I do? Despite understanding the basics of, you know, footsies, execution, screen control, etc. But yeah, alright, so that's 3 things that I think Smash, I guess it's more about Melee. I was going to call this Smash, but I just talked about Melee the whole time. But yes, 3 things that I think Smash players get wrong about traditional fighting games. So I will do the opposite. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, as usual. If you play Smash, or if there's a Smash person you want to see it, definitely send it to them. I'm really open to talk about this. I love learning about new games. You know, that's definitely one of the best parts about doing a bunch of the collabs I did last year with like Brian F, Justin Wong, Sejam, Mustard, was just learning about games I don't put a lot of time into. So super open to that. YouTube loves it when you watch other videos, so go ahead, watch another one. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.